It can't be that one, it's gotta be the metal ones.
We're trying to get the dash lights working.
Yeah, those two are dash lights, those two are instrument lights.
With the same ends on them so we can't get them mixed up.
Yeah.
There we go.
So I think what we're going to have to do is tack on a wire onto the gauges because there's so much paint on everything.
Yeah.
They have to tack a wire onto the back of the gauge somewhere. This one will be easy because you can put it on the screw. Mm-hmm. And that way we can run that for a ground.
Dash lights. Well, first off, I should say this is the early model. The late model looks different. That's the guts of it. We'll get to that in a minute. Basically, we got this thing right here. It's got these 5, 6, 7 contacts. These two at the ends are hooked together on this red wire, which, as near as I can tell, is for the hazard lights. They only work on the back, but that has to be hazard lights. So we've got positive, which is black. Because this was originally a positive ground card instead of negative ground, so that would have been negative. It's positive now. Incandescent bulbs don't care. Incandescent bulbs don't give a damn. So we got brown, which is the driver's rear. Green, which is, I guess, the passenger's rear. Let me check. Yeah, green is the passenger's rear. And then up here we have blue and yellow. Blue and white. Blue is passenger front, white is driver front. So there's that, and then hooked to that is this assembly right here, which bolts in. This is what you turn with the selector stalk. So you move that, it forces this to move, and that first forces this assembly to move back and forth. And those plastic things have 2 springs, and then these. So these, come on you. Oh, I thought this was clever. This is the sliding contact for the horn. It's not just a sliding contact, it's got a little roller in it. Thought that was cool. Anyway, hey look, a chicken. So this goes on here, and this lead right here, or this button right here, is black. So that's our positive feed. So for this one right now, it's connecting red to, that would be brown. Slide it over, it connects brown to black and also to white. I didn't really find any faults inside of it. It was kind of grimy, which wasn't helping anything. And this little piece here, it kind of popped out of its slot, so I'm pushing that back in just in case it was being unhelpful. Well, I'm ready to put this thing back together, but there's one little snag. There were a couple of fasteners in these, holding the camera and the flashlight at the same time, with these little square holes here. That's what holds this little bell end looking thing onto the steering shaft. And the fasteners for those are basically these. There's that funny little hooky thing, and a washer. Trouble is, the one little hooky thing came out. The other little hooky thing I have no memory of removing, no memory of actually, pulling it out of the thing and setting it somewhere. It's nowhere in the truck, and I'm not holding it in my hand, which means it more than likely fell into the steering shaft. Which means I need to figure out how to get it back out of the steering shaft. This is problematic because this thing still doesn't come off. Well, I think I dodged a bullet there. That little bugger fell in. Luckily I was able to put the light up here, put my eyeball down there and see it. And then I took a piece of scrap MIG wire with a crook at the end and stuffed it down there and managed to get it up and managed to pull it down and out through that little slot. What helped for that, got a Harbor Freight magnet and a little seal puller I made out of a screwdriver. And with that stuck to that, that had enough magnetism to it to pull that down through the hole. Quick tip for anyone with the misfortune of doing one of these. This is as far as you have to take these things apart. If you just take it apart that far, you can still get it in well enough to make it seat. And then, yeah, because that's on there, and then just run it down. One other thing about this, when I opened it up, it sprayed parts from Hell to Breakfast because they're all spring-loaded. Luckily, there's no carpet in the Scout for it to get lost in, and it's all simple enough to figure out where it goes. But I don't want it spraying to pieces as I put it back together, so I've got to put a little bit of grease in each of these holes in the sliders here, so I can just jam springs in like that, and they'll be a little less likely to ping off away. Probably throw a little grease on those sliding mufuxets before I stick them back in too. You might have noticed the steering wheel had some pretty deep cracks in it. You might notice it still does. This is just coat number 1 of the super highly professional way to fix a cracked steering wheel. Gotta say, it's looking better. Gonna make this thing so nice we don't know what to do with it. Well, it won't happen this winter, but we're looking to make this thing one step weirder with an external rear-mounted tire carrier. This is off of a Nissan, but don't tell it that. Basically, we ground off one of these giant cast brackets here. We're gonna make up a new one to match the body line. Grind that one to match. Figure out a latchy mufuxet. We're not bodywork experts, but we think one of the previous owners may have backed it into something.
Yeah, we were trying to align the rear window and nothing was working, so this little trick shows that I can put my finger straight through, which means that that's in 3/8 of an inch. Kind of corresponds with that dent.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
Alright, well, Scout report. Seems to be holding most of her fluids. Getting a little low on the lift fluid. I might need to add some of that. And still puddling gasoline on the intake. Getting the intake nice and clean, but that's not really what we're after. If I run my finger under the carburetor bowl, it comes out a little damp with fuel. It smells like gas, so we assume that's where it's leaking, but I should give her a closer look tonight and see if I can stop her from doing that so much. Other than that, she's running pretty well. Giving me a couple of little surprises when the choke linkage is popped off of the carburetor, making the choke slam closed and choking out the motor. Well, I just realized we've been running it this whole time with no battery hold down. We were going to get to that. We didn't get to that. So I got to that. It's pretty basic, just some rod with a T-end to go into the little slot in the battery tray, welded to an old bolt with a nut on it. This isn't really adequate. It should be like angle or something that's not going to flex, because that's flexing. But, you know, still wiggles a little, but nowhere near as bad, so I'm a little less likely to burn the thing to the ground by accident. Well, the natural choice for something like this probably would have been gloss black, but I'm out of gloss black and I had school bus yellow, so it's school bus yellow now. You can see on this link, we've got one tie rod end here, an adjusting sleeve, and then the other tie rod end is all of this. That does not unscrew. It's just a really long tie rod end with a hole for the drag link. So, yeah, that's why they're hard to find. That's why we had to get a custom one made. One thing that's nice to see is that as loose as this is, the ball was, near as I can tell, in no danger of falling out. Right, so it's worn out inside, but it's not, the end of the center link isn't about to fall off. Okay, so here's the old link out and stripped. Here's the new link next to it. Okay, so it needs to come out a bit. Start it 2 turns either end. Of course, we don't know if it was aligned properly to begin with. That looks pretty close, so that's a good starting point. I measured between the grease zerks on the other one, thinking that was probably the easiest way, and got about 46 7/8 inches, so I set these to about the same. I've also repainted this little collar flap thing here. It just was rusty and nasty, so it's got paint on it now. Okay, so I've tightened these down to German torque spec, which is basically as tight as I can get with a 3/8. It should be fine. One thing I like about the Backcountry Binders kit, it actually came with cotter pins, unlike that drag link rebuild kit we got a while back. I can't remember if I mentioned this when I did the drag link video, but you need to make sure that these little caps on the ends of this thing, or plugs or whatever they are, go all the way in. If they don't go in far enough for the cotter pin, I mean obviously you can't put the cotter pin in, but more importantly, it means that the ball isn't seated right. And if the ball isn't seated right, you're going to have a bad time. If it starts to bind up with, you know, a 1/4 inch of thread still showing, that just means the ball is not in. The easiest way I found, well, once I got it to where I could actually slot the damn ball into the hole, which was a pain, I got it slotted in and then I turned the steering all the way to the right, which sort of shoved the ball into its little slot there, and then that allowed me to screw the end bit in. As usual, the only cotter pin I found at the hardware store long enough to go through this thing was an 1/8 inch. And while that would go through the holes, it wouldn't go through the screw-in bit. It acted like it needed to go in 1 thread further, but it won't go in 1 thread further. So I assume that's just something with the milling of that or the size of the ball or who knows. So I took a 1/8 cotter pin and ground it down a little bit and got it to slide through. So that's in and locked, and I've greased all of the grease points, and yeah, all that's left is throwing the wheels back on.